Now, President Trump is on his first international tour. We learn that Qatar, a very complicated country, but one that I've been deeply critical of when it comes to its role in hiding the leaders of Hamas, but also its role in the way that it ran its Football World Cup. 4,000 people died in oppressive working conditions, so I'm no fan of the government of Qatar. But Qatar also has an airline, and that airline wants to curry favour. So guess what? They have given one of their planes worth $400 million to President Trump, while the current Air Force One is either clapped out and doesn't get used, or it's used as some sort of a spare aircraft. This seems ridiculous that he's even thinking about it, but what do you think of a gift that he probably shouldn't be taking?
I know. No, I wouldn't, and I don't love this decision by the president, though I'm not totally convinced it's a constitutional violation, but it might be. I want to look into the legal research more. But we have a clause in our Constitution called the Emoluments Clause, which says if you're in a position of public trust, you're not allowed to accept a gift or an emolument, which is basically a fee for a service. So the way he's getting around this is saying it's not a gift to me, it's a gift to the Pentagon. And then when the Pentagon's done with it, it's going to go to the Trump Presidential Library. And he's saying it's not an emolument because I'm not performing a service for this. Qatar is getting nothing. And of course, many people are like, oh, no. Qatar is expecting something. They don't give the $400 million airplane away for freezies, expecting nothing in return. And Trump just kind of says, no, you're wrong. I also believe Qatar is going to want something in return. I don't want to be in their debt. I know it's $400 million that we now don't have to spend. I don't really care. I kind of feel like, is Air Force One in its current form so dilapidated that he can't fly around in it for another 3 years? Because I didn't hear that. I haven't heard that from like the Biden people. I'm not sure. I realize Trump's got higher standards, but I don't like owing Qatar anything, to be honest. But I'm just not sure. The fact that they're not giving it to him directly, because originally the speculation was that they were giving it to him, well, giving it whatever to the government during his term. And then when he left, he'd take it. And then it would wind up in his library. That would be a deep problem. That's a hard no. But this business of it's never going to be directly to him and he's only going to be able to use it when he's president and possibly his successor will be able to use it too. You're getting closer to within the lines there. But no, I don't love it.
And the idea that the President of the United States is going to fly around in the plane that's been made by a foreign government, especially a potentially hostile one, is, how do they say it on the left? Deeply problematic.
No, and it's a humiliation for Boeing. You know, Boeing has just been taking it on the chin over and over these days. But we contracted the government with Boeing during Trump's first term to make two versions of Air Force One. Apparently, there are two planes that go as Air Force One. And we committed to a multi-billion-dollar deal. And they were supposed to have these turned around. Well, here we are 10 years later, well past the deadline. They're billions over budget. The planes are not done. And they told President Trump they won't be done until 2035 at the earliest. That means it's not only will Trump not see it, his successor might not see it. So it is ridiculous. And I think that we should be suing Boeing for all it's worth. So for the return of all of that taxpayer money. And honestly, I don't even know what Boeing's future looks like at this point. It's just every story you hear about it is a disaster.
Let's talk about the filth that's starting to come out in the early days of the Diddy trial. This, of course, is P. Diddy. Surprise, surprise, he's a creep. Surprise, surprise, he's done horrible things.
Unfortunately, we're all going to take a disgusting trip to his seedy, awful world. You know, it's the man has no class. He has no kindness in his dark, dark heart. And he's depraved. That's my opinion. This is a depraved, disgusting individual about whom I wish to hear nothing after this trial is done. The question is he a criminal? You know, is he basically akin to a mob boss running several criminal enterprises? And while it's very clear to me he is a depraved, disgusting person, we have to prove that he violated the law. I actually think it's going to be pretty easy, but I can see what the defense is doing here, trying to say, all right, he has these, quote, freak-offs, weird, kinky group sex in Hollywood. That's not an illegal thing. It happens all the time. If you don't have the consent of the women or the men, as the case may be, it is illegal. But okay, we're going to argue over whether they were willing participants. It's almost like a Harvey Weinstein situation where he's going to say they willingly took drugs and willingly participated in these things. And they're going to say, absolutely not. He drugged me against my will. Maybe there were drugs in that baby oil, maybe in another way, but I definitely didn't consent to being drugged or to being raped or sodomized by P. Diddy. And what's really going to be interesting is the parade of celebrities who we expect to be mentioned and or called into that courtroom. People who we hadn't heard about prior, like Mike Myers, Austin Powers, Mike Myers. Why is he getting called? Why is he on the witness list? That'll be fascinating. And then, of course, there are the no-name, quote unquote, women who are going to have to find every ounce of courage they have to sit on that witness stand across from someone who can buy and sell their whole families, who is accused of behaving violent in the past toward both male and female adversaries or so-called friends who ticked him off. He allegedly firebombed this one rapper's car for allegedly being interested in the same woman. There are questions about whether he's potentially done worse than that to others. And these young women with no power and no money who could put him behind bars for the rest of his life have to sit there, look him in the eye and say what he did to them. Now, that's going to be a very tall order. There's already been a question about whether one has bailed. They couldn't find this one witness late last week, and the prosecution wasn't sure whether she'd left, pieced out. And even if they don't piece out, will they stick by their stories on the stand? It's a very, very tall order.